Infirmary Media.
On a mysterious night, Rubik appeared, bringing happiness. Rubik has changed everything in our lives. He's colorful, magical, lovable. Rubik, he's our friend. Rubik, amazing cute.
Hey dudes and dudettes, thanks for tuning into this special episode of the Be Kind and Rewind podcast, as we're taking the opportunity to borrow an episode from a fellow podcast that I recently was a guest on for those who have not had the pleasure of listening yet. But first, I just want to take this time to thank all of you listeners out there far and wide. The podcast receives a lot of downloads all over the world, so we've been lucky enough to see downloads from the UK, Canada, Australia, Spain, Chile, Japan, Norway, East Coast, West Coast, and even here at home in Denver. So we've been seeing some growing numbers of listeners that I'm excited that are tuning in, so thank you all. Also, if you're bored on your drive home for work or staring at your phone during commercial break, just leave the podcast a review anywhere you listen. It's the best way for the podcast to gain attention. I know you hate hearing people constantly tell you that, but it actually does help. So if you could, just take a few minutes, write something nice, write something horrible, anything would help. So just leave us a nice, awesome review on any app that you listen to. So it would be much appreciated. But lastly, I'm pretty excited about the Denver Pop Culture Con that's this weekend here in Denver. My lifetime amigo Zach is coming in town as well, so we're going to have a fun-packed weekend. So I can't wait to walk the floor and see the different cosplay, the toys, the artists, and yes, the comics as well. So I'm always on the hunt for the Dragon Dagger, but I did check that off this year. It's off my list. It's sitting right behind me. So I'll see what else entices me. Usually it's the Power Rangers, the TMNT, Ghostbusters, Batman, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Legos, things like that. Weta toys, anything Lord of the Rings Weta, I'm probably looking to spend way too much money for, but I will shell out. And then I guess my next big hunt, now that I've checked off the Dragon Dagger, is like the movie star TMNT turtles from Secret of the Ooze, the rubbery type, more realistic Ninja Turtles. I'm always on the hunt for those. They're a little more expensive online, but I want to find them physically. So I'm hoping maybe I might run into them this weekend. And also, the Bill and Ted Circus of Time travel phone booth is always on the bucket list. So we'll see if we can come across that this weekend. But I've made it a habit of checking out the Artist Alley to find out some awesome custom art, like my black and white Avengers skyscraper piece and the Darth Vader troopers crossing the Delaware, like George Washington. So always some intricate, awesome, out of this world type of art I see out there. So I'm always on the hunt. If I see something, I'm definitely snagging it. Just like I snagged this hand-drawn scene from the first Ninja Turtles, where they're all sitting around the wood fire. Splinter, when he comes out, he's in the blue flames. Just one of those things you really wouldn't see anywhere else, or a big poster of. That's just somebody who happened to draw it. So it's on my wall now. But I'll be wearing my Be Kind and Rewind podcast shirt with my hoverboard in hand as I'm looking to get it signed by Christopher Lloyd. So any local Denverites who are out there who see me and want to say hello, I'm always up for a hug, a picture, a quick chat, whatever, or just a high five, anything. So if you see me out there, let's get a high five going. But like I said earlier, today we get to borrow from the podcast Saturday Mourning Cartoons. So that's morning with a U. And Saturday Mourning Cartoons is hosted by my amigo Sean Paul Ellis and has been around for about 5 years now, with the mission to revisit, review, and ridicule some of the world's weirdest animated series. So we talked about Rubik's The Amazing Cube, which is like this late 80s TV show that was just in the height of, let's just make anything and everything into a TV show, even if it was an inanimate object. So that's what we talked about in this episode. I had never watched a full episode until this podcast. I've only seen like the intro. I got the intro for a few episodes from on here and just clips of the show, but actually watching a whole episode kind of opened my eyes to some things about it. To not judge a book by its cover, but you're going to hear my true feelings in the podcast. But even though this is it's driven by a corporate agenda to cash in on a popular toy, there's still some give and take with it. So without giving anything away, I want you to listen to this podcast because, like I said, you would think this 80s toy came out of nowhere and you would think it would be a terrible, terrible idea, but somehow they make something work here. So, like I said, you'll get my true feelings in this episode, but check out the Saturday Mourning Cartoons podcast wherever you listen. You can find them on Facebook and Instagram at Saturday Mourning Cartoons and Twitter at Morning Tunes. So don't forget that's morning with a U. So without any further ado, on to the podcast.
Hello, my name is Rubik.
Hi everyone, Sean Paul Ellis here from the Saturday Mourning Cartoons podcast. Remember, that's morning with a U. Some quick pre-show announcements. I kept them quick last week. Will I do it again? These are pertaining to a shout-out, Spotify, and what, of course, is happening on today's episode. So our shout-out comes from YouTube, episode 233, Mother Goose and Grimm. Kato2K says, Hi SMC, greetings from New Jersey. If you have time, please review Ulysses 31 and G-Force. These are great anime cartoons from the 70s and 80s. Thank you. First and foremost, hi, how's it going, Kato? We love New Jersey. A lot of you have reached out from New Jersey and beyond and asked us to watch specific cartoons and review them. We would love to. Do us a favor so that we can make sure that you get the proper shout out. Go on any of our social media platforms. There's a link tree. You can click on the link tree and you can go to the Submit a Cartoon button, or you can call 202-681-4406. Why are you writing this down? It's in our show notes every single week. This just makes sure that you get the proper shout out, and if you call and leave a message, we will 100% review your cartoon. We just got a phone message the other day. We are now going to review that cartoon. It's that simple, gang. If you're listening on Spotify, first, thank you. Second, you may have noticed that Spotify has taken down a bunch of our episodes. Spotify gave podcasts about 2 weeks to switch over to a specific format, and guess what? It's just me working on trying to come up with a solution over here. Yep, just Sean. If anybody has an M4A to MP3 converter, just message me. I'd love to learn more about it. In fact, I'll send you some stickers. In the meantime, we are working on this. We will get this resolved shortly. So today, this is a return to form for the show. Weird, niche cartoons from the 80s. I love it. In putting together this episode, our friend Bobby Anthem messaged us to say that he remembered this cartoon, which is wild since Rubik and the Magic Cube ran for only 13 episodes, yet it definitely left an impression on those who watched it. I even found a blogger named Cookie Woke who found a terrifying parallel to a horror film that neither of my guests understood. Speaking of guests, Charlie Visconage returns, and I'm also excited to welcome a new guest, Carlos Sanchez, from the Be Kind and Rewind podcast. I really don't know what to say other than all of us went on a journey for this week's episode before we made our final recommendation. All of this and more, and so now, on with the show. Hello and welcome to Saturday Mourning Cartoons, the podcast that revisits, reviews, and ridicules some of the world's weirdest animated series. Coming to you locked inside a treasure chest in the back of an evil magician stagecoach, I'll be your host, Sean Paul Ellis. Returning to the show, he's in cube form tonight with a high-pitched voice. Please welcome returning guest, Charlie Visconage. Charlie, how you doing?
Good. I'm pumped to discuss this. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for coming back, Charlie. Joining us for the first time, and you can hear him giggling in the background, attempting to clone diamonds and thwart the effort of 3 kids. Please welcome host of the Be Kind and Rewind podcast, Carlos Sanchez. Welcome, Carlos.
Bruno, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is exciting for me because I was on a couple months ago, Be Kind and Rewind with Carlos, talking about Saturday morning cartoons. And as we were talking about the Saturday morning lineup, we got into the cartoon that we're talking about tonight. And if you're not familiar with this, we are talking about Rubik, the Amazing Cube this evening. And so thank you, Carlos, for bringing this to my attention. And
thank you for letting me get a deep dive into this. I'm ready. I'm ready to get into it.
Oh, man. Well, to really kind of baseline and level set for everybody, I wanted to ask Carlos, what was your what was your relationship with either the Rubik Cube or even this cartoon in general?
I've only heard about the show in the last few years, getting into the podcast and doing research for stuff. I didn't know it actually existed when it actually was on. But I didn't have an actual Rubik's Cube either. I always said, like, it's one of those friends toys that they had. You go there and you play with it and stuff like that. But I had my fair share of exposure, like I said, in the last few years. But now that it's on my radar, it's been on my radar constantly. And now that you brought it to my attention to watch a full episode, like, it's opened up a whole new world for me at this point in time. The only time I really had one, the only like real connection was in high school. I had one on my bed that I would use. Like, I had it solved, but I would reverse a few of the moves. So when like girls would come over, I'd be like, "Oh yeah, let me just solve this real quick." And yeah, they'd be like, "Ooh." I mean, it would work like maybe half the time. So it's not always 100%.
That's still
but
pretty good.
Still
it
pretty
worked
good
a couple
odds.
times. Yeah, and so that was like my go-to for the Rubik's Cube. So that's my connection to it, I guess you could say.
I would have never thought to have ever done that.
Wow.
Nice. Well, congratulations.
Yeah. If I had any smooth moves, that was like the only one.
You got to do the Rubik? If you're looking to flirt with somebody, show them your hand-eye coordination, your spatial reasoning, and your intelligence, all in one simple move.
Or 3 or 4, depending on
3 or 4.
Cranked it.
It's shameful, but I had it so memorized what my 4 moves were. I'm like, oh, I think it's this. Oh, wait, this maybe. Oh, here we go.
This is
So
amazing.
yeah,
Awesome.
intimidating.
Well, perfect. Charlie, what was your impression? What was your relationship with a Rubik Cube or the cartoon in general?
So I had never seen the cartoon and was sort of shocked that this even existed. But when you invited me to this, first I was like, well, I'm going to a thing, which I am, but it's later anyway, which is great. But then when you were like, oh, it's the cartoon about the Rubik Cube, I was like, oh yeah, I'm in.
What sold you on it? Just the fact that it was
so
a Rubik?
weird.
Okay.
And proved to be. I don't want to get into it too soon. As far as the toy, I never owned one. I was certainly not a smart enough child to ever solve it, nor do I feel as though I'm a smart enough adult necessarily.
Oh no, me
And
too.
I actually there's a free pile at my day job where people are cleaning out their offices, they leave little toys or calendars or whatever. So somebody actually left one out, and so I've been playing with it the past few days at my desk, and I'm still frustrated with it.
Oh, really? Have you gone as far to look up on YouTube ways to be able to actually solve the Rubik Cube?
No, I feel like that probably should. It just feels like cheating, but at the same time, I'm currently at the Neanderthal stage where there's like no ability for me to learn how to do it. So maybe that's my next step. Next time I come on, I'll be a pro.
So you're just going to kind of brute force it from now on until you get to that point where you get frustrated enough.
Yeah, if there's any kind of crossover between your listeners and people that I'm on conference calls with, that's what I'm doing when I'm on mute. Attempting to vainly solve this devil cube.
That's the union in the Venn diagram of, do you listen to our podcast? Are you on a conference call with Charlie?
I would be shocked, but if you email me and let me know, I'll say thanks.
Well, make sure to @, Charlie for all of these.
Do at me, bro.
Do
for
at
this
do
one.
it.
That's my catchphrase, Carl. Don't at me, bro.
I'll say this. My relationship with the cartoon is the same. I had no idea that this cartoon existed. It's not something that I was really familiar with. Having done the podcast now for almost 5 years, this has been a cartoon that people have always kind of suggested, but I haven't avoided it, but it hasn't been something that I've really dug deeper into. So I was glad when we had our conversation, Carlos, that this gave me an opportunity to get back into some good old-fashioned early 80s weird Ruby Spears cartoons. So that's always a joy for me to kind of dig deep inside that. I'll also say that I didn't own a Rubik Cube either. I just didn't have one. I knew other people who had it, or they had maybe like a small keychain that had one on that like you really could not move around because it was threaded at some point to hold the keychain. So it sort of took away the fun of having the toy.
Is there fun in having the toy?
Well, you tell me. You're the one playing it.
Yeah, I don't think so. The novelty wears off real quick.
Yeah.
I want to also say that for the longest time, I have been calling it a Rubik's Cube. And so I've been calling it with an X at the end. I don't that's not the name. It's
Guilty
it's
over here. I've done
spelled
the same thing. Yeah. Until like
I've
maybe
been
2
calling
years
it a
ago.
Rubik's Cube forever. Yeah.
So I must confess my own ignorance in this. I thought that there was an apostrophe S always.
What?
I thought it was like Rubik came up with the cube.
Well, I mean, literally, a guy with the last name Rubik did
Right.
come up with the cube.
I guess that was my assumption.
He didn't
in
want all the credit. He just
adding-
wanted his name on there. He just threw my name on.
This guy Erno Rubik is the person who actually created this toy. So
Huh.
yeah, so very interesting. We've already begun to talk a little bit about the history, but if you're not familiar with the history of Rubik the Amazing Cube, let's break it down pretty quick. Rubik the Amazing Cube is a 30-minute Saturday morning animated series based on the puzzle created by Erno Rubik, produced by Ruby Spears Enterprise, and broadcast as a part of the Pac-Man Rubik the Amazing Cube Hour block on ABC from September 10th to December 10th of 1983. The show ran for a total of 13 episodes. The Rubik Half Hour was broadcast in reruns as a standalone series on ABC from May 4th to August 31st of 1985. The voice of Rubik, and I love this, is done by Ron Palillo. He told TV Guide in 1983, for the role, he spoke very slowly and then technicians sped up the tape and raised the pitch. Palillo said Rubik's giggle is very different from his trademark laugh of Horshack, which is from Welcome Back, Mr. Cotter, his character in the TV series, and that the laugh itself is pretty for an inanimate object, which is
Pretty?
is
That's
kinda
the way
weird.
he
Yeah.
described it?
Gross,
Yeah,
dude.
it's kind of creepy. In keeping with the Hispanic flavor of the show, the theme song was sung by Puerto Rican boy band Menudo.
So Ricky Martin was saying the Rubik's or Rubik
He could have.
theme song?
I mean, if it was in the 82-83 time frame, and that's when Ricky Martin was in the band, then possibly.
Uh-oh. We've uncovered.
I think it's very interesting because this isn't the first time on the show that we've talked about Menudo. Last summer we did a review of the cartoon. It was a French cartoon, and it was Spartacus.
If they're gonna have Horshack be the voice, why not just keep his regular voice? He already has like this odd, like, high pitched voice.
I know, man.
I don't get it.
It almost makes
They could have
little
got
to no
anybody
sense.
if they're gonna slow down or they're gonna speed up the audio. Why would they get anybody
they could
else?
save some money.
I know. I really feel like they could have probably just gotten a very squeaky young teen who could have come on, or young kid to
He probably
to
had
do
like
it.
2 TV show contract with ABC, and it's like, all right, he just give him this voice. That's it, and we're done.
He's like, gang, what I really want to do is I really want to do something where my voice is completely digitally manipulated, but I also love cartoons.
I want nobody to know I'm in it.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned Menudo, and I want to mention that back on episode 216, we actually had Menudo sing the outro theme song for Spartacus and the Sun Beneath the Sea. So not the first time that we've had Menudo actually doing theme music for a cartoon. So very interesting to kind of see that this is the second time. We, at some point, obviously need to get Menudo to hat trick this. We have to find a third cartoon that Menudo
sure it's out there.
has done the theme song for. So if you know, I'm sure it's out
Yeah,
there.
it seems highly likely given that they've done 2 already.
Right.
They had done 2.
If you know that cartoon, at Charlie Visconage about this. He's dying to know.
I'm not your secretary.
But you're triaging this front line for all of our Menudo fans out there, so I appreciate it. If you are not familiar, because we've been talking about Rubik and sort of what this show actually entails and just how potentially weird we're going to get tonight, Carlos is going to help us break down a little bit of the plot synopsis. Please, Carlos.
Yes, so the show is about the magic Rubik's Cube named Rubik, who can fly through the air and has other special powers that are never really detailed. Rubik has fallen out of the stagecoach of an evil magician who's become the main villain of the series. So Rubik helps Carlos, which that was a surprise for me. I had no idea that the character was named Carlos. And Lisa, Ronaldo, Rodriguez, and foiling the magician's attempts to recover Rubik. Rubik can only come alive when the color squares on his sides have been matched up. So you got to be some smart kids. Episodes also contain normal adversaries, such as bullies when Carlos and Ronaldo were attempted to get girlfriends, Rubik worked in secret to expose the bully's true brutal personality in front of the girl. Rubik was easily scramble able by falling, or even the family dog. The Rodriguez kids would always find Rubik put back together in a stressful situations, and it would take much longer. So when scrambled, Rubik can only be heard making low-key gibberish, and sometimes can be heard saying "help."
It's the creepiest little factoid to throw in there is just to hear him just kind of like muffled, just being like, "Help." Just back and forth. It's so unbelievably bizarre that they would include anything even remotely similar to this in any way, shape, or form. I want to also say I love the fact that Ronaldo and Carlos, who are in this cartoon, are talking about getting girls as well. And we've already talked to Carlos about how he used a Rubik's Cube. Again, I said Rubik's Cube instead of Rubik Cube. I'm going to do it all night, so I apologize.
I did the same thing.
Yeah.
It's natural at this point.
It's going to happen, but it sounds like if you're out there and you're trying to figure out how you're going to talk to that special someone that's in your life, Rubik Cube. I'm not saying it's going to work. I'm just saying Carlos says it's got a 50% chance.
It's better than some sort of cold line or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're cold line, because we're so in your head about this educational toy anyway, is probably going to be educational toy related. You're already thinking about it right now.
Yeah.
I'm weirded out. Speaking about getting weirded out, we obviously have to enter in and begin to really discuss the theme song for tonight. A lot of thoughts, a lot of things that are interested. We've already talked about the fact that Menudo sang this theme song. And so, Carlos, I wanted to ask you, what were your impressions? How did you feel about Rubik, the theme song?
It is catchy, surprisingly catchy.
Yeah.
And I'm now finding out that Menudo sang it. It's not surprising. And then it reminds me of like a cereal jingle or like a toy jingle of some sort. So it goes hand in hand with the demographic. So it reminded me of other things similar to it. And I feel like they put some effort into it, even though the plot is crazy, beyond crazy. But they managed to put it in song form. And like I said, it's catchy enough that I like it. I still have it ringing in my head right now after just watching just the one episode. So they did it. It did its job.
Awesome. Charlie, what was your impression of the theme song for Rubik?
So I have to confess. So first, in terms of the order of operations of getting prepared for this episode, I read the Wikipedia page first. So I was like, oh, Menudo. But then I was like, I'm super ignorant and I don't really know any Menudo songs. I'm a little bit younger, certainly than Sean. I don't know about you, Carlos, and that is one reason why I may not have heard Menudo. But to me, I was like, oh, maybe this is more like Gloria Estefan, Miami Sound Machine, was what I had in my mind. So then I go and listen to the song and I'm just like, oh God. And I tried both links, listeners. So Sean sent us first a better audio but crappy visuals, and then a better visuals but crappy audio. It kind of sounded the same to me.
Okay.
I mean, I did like that it told the story of how the kids found Rubik rather than like recycling footage or, I mean, I know you love a roll call.
I kind of wonder though if it. I'll get into it. You're hitting a lot of notes from me, Charlie, that I'm going to come back into.
Okay. But overall, I mean, I have to agree. Carlos, when you said it's an earworm, I mean, then I started like replaying it in my mind, and it will be haunting me on my drive home and for days to come.
So the question that I have is that, and for everybody listening, we only watched one episode, and we watched season 1, episode 1. We mentioned there's only 13 episodes, so this is not a huge time sink if you decide that you want to watch everything. And the episode is called, for the pilot, Rubik, the Amazing Cube. So it's really just a redundancy in terms of
first idea, best idea on that title. Like,
Yep.
Boom, done.
Yeah,
Short meeting on that day.
Yeah.
This feels like it was something that they were trying to figure out like right before lunch. And they're like, just call the pilot the name of the damn cartoon. All right, are we done? Quiznos? Yeah?
Delivery driver's at the door. Figure it out. Let's do it right now.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody wants the bounce. So I kind of wonder, first and foremost, and I would actually be curious to hear what listeners say, but also watch a couple more episodes and see if this was dedicated animation, there was a part of me that was left wondering, for the 13 episodes that they put into this, is there an episode where they go back and they really talk about the origin story? I feel like it's probably pretty high, but there's a wide variety of episodes and content that they have. There's one about Lisa getting superpowers. There's one about that kind of like weirdly implies that maybe Rubik is Santa Claus. There's a Christmas special that they have. So there's a lot of content that they have. I wonder if they ever truly get into the evil magician and sort of what he was conspiring to use Rubik actually for. And so I can't definitively say that this was dedicated animation, but it looked like it was stuff from potentially an episode because of the same quality that they had. So that kind of leads me in that direction. Charlie's right. I always do love a roll call. We didn't really get one.
Yeah,
But-
I mean, at least you see who the main characters are, but they don't name them or anything like that.
Well, they name one person
Oh,
at
that's true.
the very end of the theme song, where he very creepily introduces himself to everybody.
It's currently just looping in my head right now.
Do you
Now,
wanna-
Sean, could you do? I know that you can't use the whole theme song, but can you do like a drop of him just saying Rubik?
I'm Rubik. It's.
Dude, that's a solid one.
I don't know that I want to be known for that though, Carlos.
It's almost too good.
Just isolate that and pepper it in throughout this episode.
Oh, really? You know, we don't really get much of a roll call except for Rubik introducing himself at the very end. It's fine. I do really enjoy the fact that this tells a story in a very visual fashion with a lot of music, but very minimal dialogue or lyrics actually sung for the song. And I'll say this, it is definitely an earworm, but I'm more intrigued to know what happens with this crazy magician, this evil crazy magician that, you know, he was put in a chest and then, you know, on some fateful night fell out of this stagecoach. I'm also very frustrated because the adult part of me is like, all of these problems could have been solved with a lock.
Yeah.
He could have locked that trunk. He could have locked the stagecoach. Also, this is 1983. Who the fuck is riding around in a stagecoach
Yeah, they seem to be in.
on like back roads?
This isn't 1600. So what is he doing?
Well, maybe the magician is Amish, and maybe this takes place in Pennsylvania, where you're from.
It's true.
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe he was riding out to the coast to use Rubik to boil the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Lines up. I think you're onto something.
A lot of this just really checks out. I will say the one final thing, I do like sort of the introduction, despite how creepy it is, of Rubik introducing himself. The thing that haunts me is at the very end of the theme song, they have this moment where the evil magician has realized that the chest has fallen out of the stagecoach. He turns around to go get it. So that means at some point he has to do like a 3-point turn with the stagecoach to figure out how to do that, to go back in the opposite direction to retrieve Rubik. The kids are standing there looking at him. They don't know what the fuck they've found. And then this Rubik cube beams magic onto them and teleports them up into the sky and leaves their bicycles there. And as a kid who rode my bike every day in the 80s and 90s, I would have been like, what are you doing with my Schwinn Sidewinder? That took me a lot to be able to save up for, buddy. You better go back and get that bike.
Yeah. What's Rubik?
It's coming with me or I don't go.
Yeah, exactly. You know what?
We're
I'm
a
gonna,
team here.
I like that Carlos is like, you know what? I'm going to stay with the magician
Yeah,
because he's
chill
got my
here,
bike.
guys. I just got new baseball cards on my spoke, so I don't want to. I'm not gonna leave the bike.
This Huffy is cruising, and I'm going to stay here with this magician.
I mean, maybe the main conflict arc, you know, obviously we didn't watch the other 12 eps, but maybe the main conflict arc is that the magician with his open wagon stole their bikes and he's like, hey, I'll trade you. But they're doing it like on the edge of a cliff or something.
Or he's just riding the bikes around. You know, he's
Yeah,
just like,
he's
you know what? Screw
you,
this
kids.
stagecoach. I got these Schwinns. Let's
These
do
bikes
it.
are sweet.
Exactly. He's like, finally, I've been trying to upgrade and get away from this horse.
You traded up.
I'm finally on this Huffy. I'm just gonna cruise around town.
Later.
I like to think that that's sort of the happy ending that happens.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think the evil magician got his way.
Yeah, got what he wanted, got what he's looking for. So we mentioned, just the production house that we have that's behind this is Ruby Spears. Wanted to get into our impressions about the animation style and sort of, what did this make you think of? Were there any contemporaries in 1983 that you could draw a parallel to? So, Carlos, what was your impression of the animation style for Rubik?
It definitely reminds me of like the old, 70s animation, like I kind of like Fat Albert or Scooby-Doo. Those are kind of the ones that kind of popped out to me because a lot of realistic, not realistic, but not a lot of like crazy, outlandish characters, but like a lot of human cartoons that they use and just kind of little variations of that. So yeah, it's kind of reminded me of that and something contemporary. I would say more like a Captain Planet, maybe.
Huh. Okay.
Maybe just because, like I said, that's one of the main shows I can remember. It's mostly just people before he gets to his villains and stuff like that. So I think the animation, like I said, more 70s. Kind of reminded me older animation. Even though at this point, it was 80. What was the year it came out?
83.
Okay, so I could see maybe somebody from the old guard from the late 70s came in and we're still animating for that. So that's kind of what it reminded me of.
Okay. Awesome. Charlie, what were your impressions?
Well, it's funny that you said 70s, Carlos, because I made a note in the doc that it kind of reminded me of like Scrappy-Doo if the animators had been allowed to drink at lunch. Obviously the copies that we were watching, you're kind of at the mercy of whatever medium they were on before they were put on YouTube. But even still, it's looking a little ragged,
Right?
In my opinion.
No, it's very Ruby Spears. If you've seen any other Ruby Spears,
So I am not as well versed in that. What are some of their other shows?
Sure. So I'll draw a parallel to something that I think you might be a little bit familiar with. So Ruby Spears and Hanna-Barbera had a lot of the very similar kind of art style in terms of what they had, which is very thin lines, very minimal shading. In fact, in many cases, the shading or the detail went into the environment and not necessarily the character itself. And so this has a very I'll agree. It has a very 70s and 80s style, especially in the nostalgic, I want to say apparel that they were wearing. They kind of had like bell bottoms on. So like Scooby-Doo, they kind of look like some Scooby-Doo characters. You would see even
nobody has an ascot though, but
yeah, exactly. No ascots. So but you had like a baseball or a ringer tee like on Ronaldo, which were very common during that time.
Yep.
And so you saw a lot of that particular touch. And even I'll say this: there was a moment in our episode where there's a chase scene. And even just that running animation that they had,
that made me think of Scooby-Doo.
That was
so
100% Scooby-Doo and Hanna-Barbera. So I was, it's interesting to see how much of those two, like Ruby Spears and HB, kind of had played off one another.
Yep.
And so to see that Ruby Spears being, a little bit of a smaller production house, but they've done some like massive cartoons. So it's interesting to kind of always see like when they pop up, because I'm just like, okay, here's going to be something that's going to be a very interesting in terms of like Ruby Spears. Can't wait to get into it. But yeah, so that was sort of my impression as well about just the animation style. And to answer your question, I think probably the notable Ruby Spears cartoons that a lot of people would know would be Herculoids and Space Ghost.
Oh yeah.
So those are like square within the Ruby Spears kind of entertainment. But I mean, they've done a ton. In fact, they did probably one of my favorite cartoons that we've reviewed, which has been Thundar the Barbarian.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So that was, in the age of super science, one of those crazy, like grandiose statements about the end of the world and sort of the fallout, and swords and cool stuff are back in style. And man, that was such a pleasant discovery when we finally came across that. They also... Ruby Spears had worked on the 1983 version of Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Oh.
So, which we have recently talked about too. So I'd be remiss.
Definitely rock my fair share of Alvin the Chipmunks cassettes.
Yeah, exactly.
I still want my hula hoop.
You're not gonna get it, buddy.
God damn it.
Not with those hips, Charlie.
God damn it, Dave.
We're getting really good at impressions.
Shots fired.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all just like high voice, speed it up.
Yeah, just change the pitch. You're fine. Well, we've talked a little bit about some of these characters. We've obviously talked about Rubik. We've thrown out Lisa, Ronaldo, Carlos, some of these characters. So I wanted to sort of get into this. Carlos, what were some particular characters from this cartoon that you really enjoyed, that you really either were attached to, or you can also give me the opposite, and you can just say, what were some characters that you absolutely hated from this?
Well, I can't say that I got attached to any of them yet. But I will explore more episodes. But I guess from this one episode, I would say maybe one of the brothers could go, either Ronaldo or Carlos. I think they got too many people in this party.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't know who I don't like. I can't hate on the kid who has my own name. But then Ronaldo's just the older, more compass brother kind of a guy. I don't know. In this particular episode, though, I think Bruno. I didn't really like Bruno.
You didn't really like Bruno.
I think he was definitely like a copycat of like a Scooby-Doo like type archetype or like villain of some sort.
Right. He's definitely a henchman.
Yeah,
sort
a little
of like,
henchman of some sort.
yeah, he's not the main villain. He's not the big bad, but he's like the helper.
And without knowing too much about Rubik's backstory, it is tough to kind of connect with Rubik because you don't know what all his powers are.
Oh,
you don't
boy.
really know what his connection is. How do from the intro what his like quick backstory is, but like he sometimes comes off like he's like annoyed with them.
Yeah. And right now, from the theme song, you really know that the only magic power that he has is just ditching bicycles.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's really where he is right now. Can you tell me, because we watched the first episode, they really do, and you're correct, they really do drop you right in to Rubik and don't give you a ton of backstory or explanation, at least in this first episode. What were some of the powers that you observed that Rubik has?
So he can levitate
Right.
himself and others. There's no weight limit to this. It can be a trash can or an entire boat.
Right.
He's literally like a little Yoda. I swear to God, because that's pretty much what his power. He might as well just have the ear. Does he have the ears coming out? I think he does. But he's like a little mini Yoda, so there's no weight limit or capacity to that. I couldn't remember what else I saw him do. It was a lot of levitation.
Yeah. A lot of flying and levitation and kind of navigating around danger or peril.
Able to control like the villain. Did he like wrap his powers around the villains and move them around or something like that? So he could like if you piss Rubik off, like he could do some serious damage.
Rubik will put you in a wheelchair.
He'll put you in the corner for sure.
He'll put you in cement shoes if you're not careful.
that was
He did,
horrifying.
Yeah, when I saw that part, I was like, oh yeah, they think us stupid kids, you just step in cement and it's dry. But then he was all like super dry. I was like, oh, Rubik's not messing around.
Yeah.
Maybe Rubik worked for the mob before that.
Oh yeah, like Rubik, we need you to toss another one in the river.
He would have
That's
been a
my terrible
powerful
Italian
tool
accent.
for like a Gambino crime family or something.
Yeah. You just feed him a piece of candy and then your problems disappear.
Right.
Super simple.
That's it, candy for a body. That's a fair trade for the mob.
Oh, I like this new murder economy that we've come up with so far. Creepy.
We're gonna create the Netflix dark side of Rubik, the 9 episode story. We're gonna find out about that wizard too.
I'm in for the dark version.
If
of
it was
Rubik.
produced by the people who do like Riverdale and Sabrina, I'm in.
Oh yeah,
There's a lot of like steamy teens who are really 30.
Oh man, can you imagine just like some really steamy Rubik scenes?
Like Rubik suck me off.
Oh Jesus Christ! Where just the entire time he's just like, "How's it going, girl? Want to try to solve me?" I love it. It's perfectly. It makes sense.
I like where it's going.
Yep.
I already like where this is going.
I'm gonna green light it right now.
Call us Ted
Yeah.
Sarandos of Netflix.
Exactly. So We kind of have been talking about this. What were some other powers that you observed that Rubik had? Because I've noticed a bunch, and they're confusing. I'm kind of confounded a little bit by what this cube can do.
So I think Carlos hit on all the ones I can remember. So it was like mostly levitation. He could dry the cement.
Right.
And yeah, flying. I feel like they were skirting by on a lot of the like flying / levitation.
So I have 2 additional powers that then came up that I found to be very frustrating Deus Ex Machina kind of MacGuffin tools where they were just like, oh yeah, he can also do this. One, he could fly through walls. So that means that like he could phase in and out.
Oh, that's right.
There's that one scene, in the very beginning where we find Rubik when he gets kind of, unshuffled or like kind of he gets scrambled. He falls through a floorboard. But there's other parts where he just transports himself through a brick wall. And I was like, which one is it, buddy? Stop. Like, there was a part of me that's like, yeah, pick one. I was like, how much of this is you just wanting to fuck with other people? And just being like, uh-oh, I fell through some floorboards. Come and figure me out. just the entire time. And then there was another one where at some point, somebody, I believe it was Bruno, was holding on to Rubik. And Rubik just expands his size exponentially so that suddenly Bruno can't grasp him anymore.
Yeah.
And so there's these parts where he's like making himself bigger and then smaller again. So, I mean, we've talked a lot on this show about how, you'll see this in Warner Brothers cartoons, like Looney Tunes cartoons, like when they reach into that hammer space kind of behind their back or like in a pouch, like Popples would reach like into their little like tummy bags and then pull out whatever the hell they needed in order to solve a problem. But it almost feels like instead of having Rubik reach into hammer space, he just is hammer space. Like anything he needs in order to solve a problem, he's like, I'm just going to do it. Like, don't worry about it, gang. I'm going to figure it out.
Can't trust these preteens to take care of our problems.
I will say this, though. I really did like the fact that a lot of this cartoon focused around the interaction of these 3 siblings. And I loved the fact that there were times where you saw some individual personalities, like the Carlos character that we had that was on here, like he was pretty fearless. We had Ronaldo as sort of the big brother. He was a little bit more kind of like reserved, maybe scared. There was definitely some moments where they sort of put some pressure on him and they definitely had an audible like gulp like in his throat. So he has I think sort of a moral compass. He's realistic. He's cautiously optimistic maybe, which is what I kind of always describe myself as. So I can empathize and relate. And then we have Lisa, who I feel is just, it's very challenging because when you look at some of these older cartoons, you realize just kind of how sexist they are in certain cases. And at some point they just tell Lisa, they're like, you can't come. Girls can't run fast. And she's like, fuck you. Like, I can run as fast as the both of you. So, I mean, I like seeing her stick up for herself, but at the same point, I don't like really seeing the fact that they had to put in some of these like very kind of like sneaky things suddenly, as well as also with the mom character.
Oh man, talking about the mom, all it is about the diet, and she looks great.
She's like, oh, this is gonna ruin my diet, but whatever. Like that's what she's focusing on.
Right. It's just one single piece of candy, and she's like, I know I shouldn't do this.
If I get a little too thick, your father will be upset.
Yeah, exactly. The implication is there.
Yeah, you know what? I think you're going to be fine after that one Reese's cup.
Yeah,
I think you're going to be okay. So,
well, that was kind of like in the Robot Chicken clip that you shared with us.
Yeah.
From this was very much on the like sexism angle.
Yeah, absolutely. So if everybody's not familiar, Robot Chicken did a fantastic spoof of Rubik with the 2 brothers and the sister sort of uncovering some treasure. It looks like it's in Egypt. I mean, it's in a desert with a pyramid. And so I'm making some assumptions, but there's only so many places in the world that have that topology and those specific artifacts. So it's it's interesting to kind of see that. It's definitely worth your time if you have watched Rubik to see how crazy it gets, because it is insane.
That's a real deep cut.
Yeah.
That's one reason I enjoy Robot Chicken is like they like in the one they did like about Mask, which I know you've
Yes.
done another previous episode about the real Mask, but
Yes. It's always good to see and have sort of that insider baseball knowledge. And I think that I enjoy Robot Chicken that much more. I mean, I love the show to begin with, but to now have the additional context of all the cartoons that they're playing around and joking with, it just makes it that much richer for me.
Yeah, their reference game is on point.
It's fantastic. I agree. Any final questions? I mean, we had a villain in this.
I would say like the henchman was really more Bruno the henchman kind of made a bigger impression to me than the villain.
Yeah, is it just because of the mouth breathing that he did?
I think 100%.
I think that's it. That's all of
Me.
it. Yeah.
Me personally. And the close up on his face was like, man, they could have spent a little more time on that animation.
I mean, they're cost saving wherever they can.
I guess so.
I just love
Dr.
the
Angus was like all handsome and stuff too. They're just like they didn't try to make him like an ugly evil villain. Like he's like this handsome mad scientist.
And you bring up a great point, Carlos, is that far too often when we have villains or when we actually have the villain in any of these cartoons, they're drawn ugly, or they're the color purple or blue, or they shade them in a very specific way, and they isolate to show that they're the villain. This villain is just like, I'm doing science in a basement of a haunted house, and I'm DTF. like swipe right on me, ladies. Holla at you, mad scientist.
Hey, if you like a touch of gray, you could do worse.
He's sort of a little silver fox scientist.
Yeah, he's got a little bit.
Handsome.
And I mean, think about it comparatively to his wingman, Bruno. I mean, he's a stud.
Yeah, well, maybe he like horribly keeps Bruno around to kind of be like, ladies, look at what you could have.
I think that's a terrible comparison.
I mean, it's a shitty move, but it could be something he's doing.
I mean, fair. That is possible. Any final questions about the characters for Rubik?
Does he have a stomach?
Oh, good question. Do you think that Rubik doesn't have a stomach?
I mean, he can consume human food like no problem. I guess
Well, we don't ever see the other end when he's fully.
That's true. That's true. What if you fold the end into the front? You never know. And I guess does he have a kill mode? Because like Spider-Man, can he go into instant kill mode?
That would be so horrifying with same voice but like the red eyes.
It's like instant kill mode.
And just the giggle.
It's just like spikes erupt from every angle.
After seeing some of his like dark side turn on Bruno, I'm like, man, like I said, don't piss off Rubik. He could he could get some stuff done to you.
Yeah, I mean, he's gonna throw. We've said it before. He's gonna throw a boat at you if you frustrate him.
True.
I mean, that's very weird. So for tonight's plot discussion, we've mentioned the episode that we've talked about. We've mentioned the episode that we've watched tonight. Encourage you to go out and check it out. We're obviously not going to go beat by beat through the entire episode. Instead, we've got some high-level thematic questions. And so first one that I want to throw out to you guys is, for a toy that really didn't need a backstory, what was your impression, reaction, and feeling about the story that they created for Rubik? And so, Carlos, what was your feeling about this story? Could you have done it better?
Yes, always you can think you can do a little bit better, but for this one, they've created such a intricate backstory for an inanimate object. Like they gave it the magician falling off a stagecoach in 1983. They really put in the effort to give it some sort of a creative backstory. But for my first reactions though is like you kind of have to go with it because there are no expectations going into it. Like you're not, when you think of the Rubik's Cube, you don't think of the origins of what a character can be. Whatever they come up with, I'm just going to go with. And what they came up with, I think it was decent enough. I like the magician aspect of it, but and then for him to be running around with this with the Latin family with the kids, I think is a good idea. But it was a little. It took me back a little bit, but because you hear about Rubik's Cube and you think this is going to be another corporate exploitation type of like cash grab, but kind of put some effort into it, so I'll give him E for effort.
Okay. And possibly an E for everyone. I mean, this is a pretty family friendly cartoon. Charlie, what about you? Any specific impressions about the story that they created? Do you think you could do it better?
I mean, kind of as Carlos said, I mean, I would love to be able to say yes, but sort of the challenge of such a blank slate. And it is so funny to me, you know, you were talking about at the top that this was packaged alongside Pac-Man, which,
Right.
I mean, at least there's a video game that you could play, and then he had Miss Pac-Man at least. Like, there's something there, but you've got two kind of properties with really, I mean, at least Pac-Man, you've got a little bit more of a like writing prompt, right?
Right.
Like, you know, natural antagonists in the Ghost. What is the Rubik Cube's natural antagonist? Like your own frustration and mental limits. So, which I'm glad they did not make a cartoon about. That would be really boring.
Oh, that'd be fun. That'd be dark too. We got to add that.
be.
Add that into
Yes.
the Netflix series.
That's in the
that we got.
Netflix one. It's
Series,
just,
yep.
I've been trying to solve this
Yeah,
cube
it's-
forever. Is it ever going to get complete?
yeah, the dark reboot is all about nihilism, ultimately. I mean, yeah, they put some effort into it, certainly. I mean, it wasn't a total like fart out an idea. At the same time, there's a lot of weird shit like, why is it a baby? The comment on the YouTube page that you sent us, what the top one was like, it would be good if he hadn't had the baby head. But it's sort of like a baby crossed with a demon, but like a friendly baby demon,
Friendly baby demon.
unless you're pissed.
A friendly baby demon. I like that.
Yeah. I feel like that's an oxymoron at some point, but
Yeah,
you know, I'm good with it.
It's a great band name.
definitely.
Friendly baby demon. I'm gonna agree with you guys. I feel like there was definitely, it felt like some effort, and I think that the challenge is with the blank slate, you know, that there's a lot of directions that you could go in. I would be interested to watch that backstory episode to figure out what this evil magician was doing. I don't know that I would change the character design though. I'm kind of weirded out about this because I mean it is, for all intents and purposes, at the end of the theme song, when you get the like, oh, Rubik, you're like, oh, is this what I'm going to be hearing the entire time? I didn't feel that they did it that much in the actual episode itself. So they give you an impression or an expectation at the end of the theme song that it's going to be this horrible, pitchy, weird baby voice. And then you get into the episode and he's like, hey, what's up? Candy's good. You're like, okay, like this isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
I mean, I like Meatwad on Aqua Teen Hunger Force, and he's vocally not dissimilar.
Correct.
I think the other thing is, you know,
do right now.
at least they took a big swing on it. Like, they could have just as easily painted like 2 dots and a smile on the 3-dimensional cube, or
Right.
done like googly eyes or something.
I would have loved googly eyes.
I mean, that would be cool.
if you would have
All
put
day,
googly
yeah.
eyes.
No, you're right.
Oh.
The effort was put in there, and I think for me, it's like make a choice. Give him legs, let him walk around, or if he's gonna float, he's gonna float all the time. No one's gonna walk. If you can float, you're not walking anywhere.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
That's why. Sorry, I took it to left field there.
No.
But,
No, I mean, if he's just gonna fly and he's gonna levitate everywhere, then what really is the purpose of legs other than just to kind of allow him to it's like landing gear
Yeah.
for a magic cube where it's like, oh, let's just have him stand for a little bit, you know. That could have been, if they would have taken out his legs, that's an entirely new portion of the budget that they could have used for Bruno's face.
there
You know,
go.
there's a lot
Fill
that
it
they
in.
probably could have done. Yeah, right. I also think too that if you had added the head, Rubik's head, on top of the cube, and so it was like head, cube body, legs, that would have been even more disturbing to
Oh,
look
that would
at.
be weird. I don't
Yeah.
want to think about like Rubik, because then it's like, well, he probably should have like a butthole if he has legs, and we're assuming the cube
He needs
contains
two
his
cheeks coming
internal
out the back.
organs. Yeah, exactly. He's not wearing pants.
I mean, are these
It's
like
true.
are they like the same color like as his face?
Yes.
Are they just like
Yeah.
They're lighter. Well, they're not lighter because they're exposed, so they're the same color.
Yeah.
It's just two weird
He's getting
butt cheeks on the back.
equal amount of.
So are you saying
sun
that the
exposure.
version that we have is the perfect version? There's no other way we could do it?
No, we just pitched it with butt cheeks. Yeah, I
Yeah.
want butt cheeks on a Rubik.
Okay.
What are we talking about? That's perfect.
And either totally CGI or a very grotesque puppet, kind of like a Pee-wee's Playhouse grotesque puppet.
God,
He just poops out little tiny little squares, colored squares.
Yeah, there you
man.
go.
That would have been weird. This just made me remember there was a toy that I had in the 80s. They were called Boglins. And they were like these little like finger puppet characters that you would put over your fingers. And it looked like a little like, I guess, bog/goblin. And so then you could kind of like make their faces move with your
Oh
your
yeah,
hand.
I think I've seen these.
They were like creepy and weird, but then they had like a very weird kind of like flesh kind of texture to them that was like in between like silicone and like kind of like a weird skin. But just for some reason, it suddenly just reminded me of that. And like to have your hand behind that puppet, that Boglin puppet controlling Rubik's face, I'm like, oh, I don't like this.
Yeah, no thanks.
Yeah, no,
That's
no, I'm
that's
good.
funny because I'm actually having the for next week the guy who invented those, Tim Clark,
Are you serious?
Whoa.
designed those. So yeah,
Shit. Perfect. Love it.
perfect
Oh,
segue
that's
to
awesome.
that.
Perfect segue. No, that's great. So I think we've officially and authoritatively answered question 1. So I wanted to ask, just in particular to the episode that we watched tonight, because there was a lot. There was a lot that was in this episode, just in terms of there was a Halloween theme, the haunted house in a neighborhood trope that you have, mad scientist. There was a ship captain at some point in time. So there was even like a kidnapping that was included here. And so I wanted to ask, just for this episode in general, were there any particular questions or like WTF moments that you had watching this that you wanted to particularly discuss? Carlos, anything from you?
I think we discussed earlier just trying to get a handle on what exactly Rubik's powers are, because he just uses such a variety, and for you, like you said, just when the plot needed him to use it. So I was like, did they ever establish in another episode that Rubik can do this, this, and this? So I'm not,
Right.
because we say we just watched the one episode, and is there this episode you keep talking about that is this backstory, or is this what we want, or does it exist?
I feel like that's the question, like the existential question for Rubik. Is he just the thing that you want, or does he just simply exist, as a thing that you want? I feel like that's what's
Whoa.
weird.
Boom.
Probably not.
Just
But
went
still.
deep. Boom goes the dynamite.
It's just very weird, because you're right. Like, I mean, he just seems to be able to do everything and then also nothing at all.
Yeah.
He'll crash through a floorboard and completely scramble himself. He'll cause property damage and then be like, oh no, I'm unusable now suddenly.
Yeah, what if he does this and none of the kids are around? Like, he's gone forever.
Right. Yeah, if these kids grow out of him and they're just like, we don't really want you anymore, Rubik, like what does he do then? Does he just say, I'm going up to like a big Rubik cube in the sky? Or does he...
Or what if he's like, hee, I can't die.
He just
This
haunts
is a
them forever.
curse.
They just unscramble him and put him in like a soundproof box.
Oh my god.
I don't
Or
know.
he's more like Wolverine, and he just ages slower than everyone else.
Ugh. And then there's just like an old man Rubik.
With
Oh,
the
that'd be-
beard and all like all scratches
Drinking
all
problem.
over him. Yeah.
Yeah,
I would watch that.
yeah, I would
100%
definitely
watch
do Old Man Rubik.
that. Yeah, I would do old man Rubik. Charlie, any particular WTF moments or questions from watching this? As we've talked about, sort of understanding the powers of Rubik. Anything that you walked away with that you were like, I don't get it.
I mean, I think I got what they were going for.
Right.
It's all like pretty goofy. Nothing beyond what we've discussed so far.
Okay.
Because I think, like, I mean, one thing that you might say is maybe like kind of hands-off parenting, but I also think in 1983 that was pretty standard.
Yeah.
That's just a 2019
That's
lens
just
on
the
it.
way it was. Yeah.
Also, I
Yeah.
have no children, so I can't really comment.
So I wanted to bring up a very interesting and kind of weird note. Before we get into our final question, I was looking and doing a little bit of research, and I came across a blog, and I apologize if I get this wrong for this person who I reached out to on Twitter. I think it's pronounced Cookie Wook or Cookie Wookie. He brings up a great point. And I'm going to throw this out to you guys and see if you can help me understand the movie, because when I realized this, I was like, oh, this is pretty chilling. All right. Unlimited power within a box. And when the box is unshuffled, or when the potential problem box isn't solved, no problems. But the moment you solve the box, suddenly that power is unleashed on the world. This is the plot of the horror film Hellraiser.
I've never seen Hellraiser.
Oh, no? You've never seen Hellraiser? Okay. Pinhead, the guy with all the...
Yeah, so I'm familiar with the image.
Right, so they have like a puzzle box concept that's in this, and it's always somebody finding the puzzle box, solving it, and it unleashes hell on Earth.
Ah,
And then they're scrambling to, like unsolve the puzzle
gotcha.
and send him back to hell. And so at this moment when I was reading this blogger's review of just like, I'm pretty sure I thought that this plot was Hellraiser. And I was like, oh my God, you might be right.
I got to watch that after this.
It's you're gonna love it and you're gonna hate it. So it's a 80s horror film that I think it stands the test of time, but it's one of those that, like, as more and more sequels get added, they just get crazier and crazier.
I think they're rebooting it too. It's definitely coming back.
Oh, here
well,
we
yeah,
go.
I thought I saw a headline about that.
Can't wait. If there's a cameo with Rubik in there, that's
Or it's just like on
Perfect.
somebody's desk.
yes. Just
Little
there's an
callback.
yes, and there's just an office scene of somebody with a box, like, and they have it, and it's Charlie behind a desk, and he's like, "How did I get into this movie?" You're just like, "Oh, you're in Hellraiser now, friend." But I haven't seen it. But you're in it.
Like, oh, no wonder I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
In that universe, it doesn't exist.
But I'm living it now. So for the final question tonight, I wanted to talk about the idea that, we obviously have a cartoon that centers around, I want to say it's sort of an educational toy, something that, isn't necessarily just sort of like a toy that's necessarily derived from a cartoon. This was something where Erno Rubik had created this toy, sold it, and it had obviously been very popular. But what I wanted to know is there another toy from the 80s that you would want to give a random backstory to? Now, I know that you joked about the hula hoop earlier, but is there a toy that you played with, that kind of was in that vein of it didn't have a cartoon associated with it? Maybe it was a board game like a Jenga or something like that. Something that you would be like, I want to give a backstory, much like they did with the Rubik Cube.
Oh, I have a thought, Carlos, unless you want to go.
Go for it. I'll jump in
So
after
this-
you.
This isn't an 80s toy, but kind of along the same lines of something a little bit more active is like, what if there was Bop It? This
Yeah.
the
I'm on
animated
the
series.
same page with you. I'm
Yes.
very close to your thought.
But I could see it going one of two ways. I could see it being like PBS could pick that up
Okay.
and make it like very wholesome and family friendly. Like a group of friends who are always on them. Like it could just be sort of like subliminal messaging about exercise, essentially.
Okay.
Or it could just be like, an underground fight club that only uses the bop. And people emerge like bruised and bloodied.
In the year 20XX,
Right, yeah.
Bop It is the only weapon.
You see like the drone footage of a city that's just pretty much decimated and like garbage cans on fire.
Oh,
It's like
man.
RoboCop.
And then like twist it,
Right, yeah.
pull
Bop
it,
it. Pull it.
pop it.
Yeah, maybe Bop It is like a bomb if they don't
Ooh.
continue to do, if somebody has to always be on watch.
Like they have to, almost like a Simon Says, that you have to like go through the combination in order to defuse the bomb.
Yeah.
Oh man, I like
Ooh.
it. Yeah.
I'd be curious.
Some sort of hellish game.
Oof. Oh, I like that. Carlos, any ideas from you?
So I think I've always wanted a dedicated mythology to the play school viewfinder.
Oh
Ooh.
So maybe the viewfinder is like it's in a time capsule. We'll do like a Jumanji. Like these people find it, these kids find it, and they start looking at it, and maybe it like predicts like future tragic events that they have to. Every time they click it, there's a new event that they have to like go stop or something before it happens. So
Sort of like Final Destination style.
Exactly, with the viewfinder.
Ooh. That is creepy, and I love it.
I'm into that.
I am very into that whole idea.
So I think
Man.
the viewfinder could have a dark side to it.
Yeah.
I like this. Netflix, if you're listening, and I know you are,
We
'cause you
got
listen to every
We're
episode.
dropping gold this ep.
They're making pretty much anything. They can make this.
Yeah. I think the viewfinder is great. Well, because you've got pretty much an unlimited set of stories to tell based on like whatever somebody crams in it.
Put like just put like a new little, what was it, the little picture
Sort of
slides
film
on there.
circles. Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but on the viewfinder there was that little toggle switch
Mhm.
that you would do, and and it would rotate the disc, and so it could be like you're seeing yourself, and it's like behind you.
Ooh.
Ooh. It's like it was like a Conjuring style direction in this. Where
Out
you're
of all
kinda
the
seeing...
ideas we've had, none of them have been happy. We've taken them all dark.
Guys, what we're trying to say is that we're really excited to be sponsored this week by the reboot of Hellraiser. So, we should have mentioned, I know that this is an auditory or an audible format, and Carlos is dressed up like Pinhead right now, and so could not be more excited. Could not be more excited. I had a couple toys that I was thinking about. One was along the lines of what Charlie had mentioned, was Skip It.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the whole idea of like the skip it.
Skip
Right.
it.
I kind of wanted like a random backstory of like this thing that like gets like attached to your leg. But I could see it obviously going from that assessment or from that pitch going in a dark direction. But I could also see it as being something where it's like it's attached to your leg and like it requires friends to help you figure out how to get it off, or it requires like a group of friends to come together to, to actually, skip over top of it in order to release it. Ultimately, though, I keep going back to these horror-themed ideas.
still
It's not
Always.
good.
Yeah, we can't get away.
I hate the fact that like the other idea was one of those like a barnyard, speak and say things where like it has like it was a kid's toy like in the 80s where like you pull the ripcord and then like it would rotate the little arrow to like a different animal.
Oh,
and,
yeah,
the
yeah.
cow says moo, and be like, perfect. I had one of those when I was a kid. I loved it. But like, again, I'll go in the same direction. Let's just make it dark. Like, let's just make it creepy as possible.
Well, maybe that one takes place in like a slaughterhouse.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, wow.
Oh my
Keep going down the rabbit hole. Let's do it.
Or it could have just been like a very farm friendly kind of like 4-H club, where it's a like that toy kind of like floating around, sort of like a Rubik, helping kids with like their chores on the farm and like explaining to them about like animals and like different things. And like you pull the ripcord and it was like a factoid about like cow's milk. Oh, I'm just trying not to make it
I
so
think
drastically
you have a
terribly
future at
depressing.
PBS.
Yeah, I mean, they are nearby where you live.
I mean, it's very true. And we just did the Magic School Bus for our previous episode too. So, we're in that educational track right now, gang.
We're really more in the Magic Ghoul bus of pitches otherwise.
That was pretty good. Damn it. If anybody else,
For not being a
especially
dad,
Ellis,
that's a sweet dad joke.
yeah. If anybody else has any other Magic School Bus related puns, please at Charlie and me.
Yeah, I want to hear them.
I guarantee it's probably going to be Ellis Abrams.
I'm into it.
Yeah, I'm into it. I'm here for it. So we have had an opportunity to talk a lot about our impressions, our thoughts, our feelings about Rubik. So, but guess what? You listening right now. Yeah, you listening out there right now at this exact moment. It turns out you guys have some opinions about Rubik as well. And so we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to honor those reviews. And so we're now going to turn it over to longtime listener and friend of the show, Bobby Anthem, for this week's Love It or Hate It. Bobby, take it away.
This week's Love It is titled, He's Colorful, Magical, Laughable, by Servo Program 10 in February 2003. This one says, Rubik the Amazing Cube was yet another well-remembered 80s cartoon based on 80s pop culture, namely the best-selling game puzzle cube of the same name. Rubik was an alien with an amazing array of powers, but was rendered powerless in every sense when his colored sides were misaligned. Usually the slightest tumble caused this to occur. I remember how animals would nudge Rubik, causing him to misalign. Some animals actually realigned Rubik as well. It was refreshing to see some ethnic diversity within the show, as well as the family who cared for Rubik were of Latin descent. The opening theme was performed by Latin sensation group Menudo, who are also featured as a part of ABC's Saturday morning programming schedule the season that Rubik ran. And our hated is titled Before There Was Dora the Explorer by Isage 121-113 in March 2006. Before there was Dora the Explorer, there was Rubik's Cube. I'm willing to bet this was the first U.S. English cartoon featuring a primarily Hispanic Latino cast of characters. I don't remember much about the individual episodes, but I knew that the people were Hispanic. The accents were sometimes annoying as heck, but the cartoon filled the time well, especially if the Smurfs were running a repeat story. Like any toy gimmick cartoon, it was 3 years past its freshness date and doomed to being canceled after 13 episodes. Dora the Explorer seems to borrow a lot from Rubik's Cube, particularly because it relies on inanimate objects that will on occasion talk to people.
It's always weird to see Love It or Hate It where it's not really much of a hate it, but it's people who are really kind of talking about the fact that, you know, they recognize that there really was some good and fantastic representation and diversity in terms of the cast. You know, I know that we've kind of talked about the two brothers and the sister, and I would probably venture to say that over the course of the 13 episodes, you do get a little bit of personality from each one of them, but I kind of like them as sort of this like sibling unit, you know, doing things together. Like I mean, I have a sibling. I didn't do a ton with them. Like when we kind of got to that age, it was sort of you made your own friends, you did your own things, like, you know, but it's nice to sort of see these three kids kind of hanging out and continue to do that. I really do appreciate and like the fact that the Love It or Hate It at least like addressed and talked about that a little bit too. Always fantastic. Plus, Bobby Anthem, what a gem! what a true what a true gem
What a guy.
of the world. He's the best. So we're now at the point where we get to give our recommendations about Rubik the Amazing Cube, and so. For any new listeners out there, we can recommend a cartoon and we can tell you why we're recommending it. We can also say we don't recommend a cartoon and we can give you our justification. If we don't recommend something, we can go one step further and we can give it the dip. Yes, the Roger Rabbit style dip. We dunk it, it erases it from the annals of cartoon history, and it is democracy on this show. So it's if we have two people who vote in that direction, we can dip a cartoon. So I want to turn it over to our guest. Carlos, thank you so much for being here tonight. What is your impression of Rubik? Recommend or not recommend?
So, like we talked about, I've had a bias against the show just since I've known of its existence. I figured it was this corporate exploit, so I didn't give it much of a chance. I've only talked about it vaguely without really watching an episode. I listened, don't get me wrong, I listened to that intro more than I've actually seen any other images of this show. But after watching the entire episode, and even though the plot was a little crazy, I felt that they put enough effort into creating the character out of like I said, this inanimate object. They created a little bit of a good backstory. I did like the Latin like demographic they were going for. I had no idea that was an angle they were going for, and so for me, going back retrospectively, yes, I probably would have enjoyed it if I was growing up. So now looking back at it, I never thought I'd say it, but I would recommend people check out Rubik the Amazing Cube.
Awesome. Thank you, Carlos. Charlie, How we feeling, buddy?
Okay, so I'm normally a hater, but I'm just going to say it up front and then give my justification. This is a recommend for me.
All right.
And I'm going to tell you why. Because it's so fucking weird. I think that I was drawn to doing this app because it's such a strange concept. I can't think of anything else like it. Where there's a toy with no backstory, given a totally like balls to the wall animated persona that only exists under certain conditions and has sort of an unlimited power set. Plus, you've got the sibling element, you've got the Latin element, which is pretty unique. I mean, at bare minimum, like, eat a weed gummy and watch it on YouTube. I mean, which I did not do. I watched the episode twice, totally sober.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I did not.
But noise. But yeah, you could do so much worse than Rubik, and it is just like real weird. So I think it deserves a recommend.
We're 3 for 3 in terms of recommendations. I recommend Rubik as well. I really came into this thinking that I was going to go in the opposite direction, and I was proved wrong. And Charlie, I 100% agree with you. This show, and Carlos, this show is weird. It doesn't have any right to be weird. It doesn't have any right to exist, but it is here. It is bonkers insane. It doesn't have to 100% make sense, but for me, this sort of felt like that truly nostalgic moment that we really created this podcast for in general, which is to get back to some of these weird fucking cartoons that pop up that are might not be in your immediate zeitgeist. It might be sort of at the fringe, but then you jump into it and you're like, okay, yeah, this served a purpose. Like, this had a reason to exist, even if it's just to, kind of cringe at the fact that Horshack, did this weird digital voice for this cartoon. Like, it's there. It's enjoyable. It's not insulting in any way, shape, or form, except for the obvious caveat of the sexism that's in this.
That's pretty insulting. But
could have really done without that.
And all the cliches you talked about in regards to the plots and everything, it seems like it's a cliche now because we've seen them so many times. But this was the early '80s, so they kind of were like maybe borrowing, but they also were kind of new to that kind of device when it comes to plot.
For sure.
Exactly. And I think that what you just said, Carlos, really, really hits it on the head. This felt new. I don't feel like I've ever watched anything else that's really been like this show, with the obvious exception of Hellraiser. And so for that, I have to recommend Rubik. Man,
awesome.
3 for 3.
Yeah, 3 for 3.
Did you guys think that we were going to get there 3 for 3 on Rubik?
No,
not at all.
When you sent me the notes, I'm like, I can't wait to talk how much I hate this. I can't. And then I watched the episode. I'm like, what is happening? What's happening here?
Yeah, do I like this?
Yeah.
And welcome to every episode of this show. This is what happens to me consistently. Well, there you go. We recommend Rubik. You should check it out. 13 episodes. Do it sober or with a weed gummy, according to Charlie.
Yeah, baby.
But definitely worth your time to check out and enjoy Rubik. So, Carlos, I want to thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thank you.
Anything that you'd like to plug, and where can the good folks find you online?
So next week's podcast, like I mentioned earlier, we have Tim Clark, who is a toy and puppet designer for
Can't
like
wait.
Jim Henson and Sesame Street and Dark Crystal. So he'll be on next week, so everyone stay tuned for that. But episodes come out every Thursday, so you can check it out on all the podcast apps like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeart Radio, and then Infirmary Media Podcast Network. And then we're on all social media like Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Be Kind Rewind Pod. So again, thank you for having me on this, for changing my mind, and opening my mind to Rubik.
I love it. That's what we're here to try to do every episode. Do we succeed? Probably not. Awesome. Well, thank you, Carlos. Appreciate it. Charlie, what's going on with you, buddy? What do you got going on? Where can the good folks find you on social media?
You can find me at Sweaty in the City on Twitter, because I made that before I decided to make anything worthwhile, where you can at me at your various wishes. The social media platform where I really spend most time is Instagram at CA Visconage. Given when this comes out, myself, Sean, and Melanie, your lovely wife, just finished a show.
Yeah.
And it was amazing and exceeded all of our expectations.
Perfect. That's what I'm glad. So excited. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Charlie. Appreciate it, man. And it's CA Visconage on your IG, right?
Yep.
Got it. All right. Well, you heard him on this week's episode. Our friend Bobby Anthem. Go check him out on Twitter at Bobby Anthem. Send him a message. Show him some love. He is simply the best. As for me, I perform live improv comedy with a group that's called Nox. That's NOX exclamation point. You can find tickets and times witdc.org. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Sean Paul Ellis. Want to support us? Yeah, this little show. Tell a friend, review us, and subscribe on Apple iTunes. Slide into our DMs on Twitter at Morning Tunes. Remember, that's morning with a U. Check us out on Instagram and Facebook at Saturday Mourning Cartoons. Drop us an old-fashioned email, SaturdayMourningCartoons@gmail.com. And you can find all of our links, all of our contact information in our link tree that's in the bio for all of our social media sites. And you can always listen to us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify. I think we're now on iHeart Radio, maybe.
Are you on Sirius XM?
Yeah, we're trying. Who isn't?
You're on After Stern.
Yeah, right. And you can find us anywhere where you listen to your podcasts. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll be back in 2 weeks again for another episode. And so I wanted to ask, on our way out, on the count of 3, can we all just go, I'm Rubik, in our best
You
Rubik
get
impression?
it.
All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. I'm Rubik. Thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Hey, everybody. Thanks a lot for listening to Saturday Morning Cartoons. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to transform and roll out.
Well, that was the Rubik the Amazing Cube episode with Saturday Morning Cartoons podcast. So I want to thank Sean and Charlie for having me on. Help me discover my true feelings about this animated show that I just never gave a chance. So I suggest, if you haven't already, take a look for yourself and see if Rubik the Amazing Cube will now become your favorite show. So other than that, thanks everyone for tuning in this episode. Tune in next week for new episodes of the Be Kind and Rewind podcast. Subscribe and rate us on all podcast apps, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Be Kind Rewind Pod. So thanks, and be excellent to each other.
Infirmary Media.